concept. We were debating this concept of, is TEFCA going to exist in the Trump administration? How do we organize around it? And TEFCA is designed to be a network of networks. So it's a protocol between network A and network B. But the dirty little secret is, how many people are on the networks at all? And so you've had this concept of network ubiquity. Could you take a few minutes to just explain what is the state of network usability and how ubiquitous are the networks today with physician involvement?
Yeah, great question. So we're heading towards ubiquity. We're getting to that place where we have 70% of providers, 75% of providers on care quality. And we've stalled. We've stopped and plateaued.
How many?
75% of providers are on care quality.
That's a big number.
That's a big number.
Wait a minute, I thought the networks were much smaller.
So TEFCA's much smaller.
TEFCA's small, but the overall networks are at 75%.
Yeah, if you take eHealth, Exchange, Commonwealth, care quality, that hybrid, Frankenstein, you get 75% of providers. But we've stalled. The behavioral health specialty EHRs are not joining. And TEFCA, or whatever we do next, I like TEFCA because I don't like constantly waffling, but I don't give a shit.
I'm on the mend and don't end it crowd. So to me, TEFCA is a verb, not a noun. And keep going.
Network building takes time, so you have to push forward. And almost all networks that want to reach the long tail, the rural places, the FQHCs, they need regulatory help. They need a push over the edge. Because otherwise, when you privatize the network of USPS, you don't serve the rural areas, you don't serve the unprofitable long tail. And so TEFCA, or some incentive or something, is necessary to get us over the hump to ubiquity. And private markets will continue to progress, but we won't see every EHR practically make that choice.
Okay, we're riffing off of script, and I'm going to ask Jocelyn to give me some real-world feedback from Aetna. So let me just draw an analogy and see if this holds. So when on 9/11, the message to evacuate the towers was heard by police officers.
Very curious where you're going with this one.
And not by the firefighters. So in the 9/11 report, the last outstanding recommendation we came into the Obama administration was that we create an interoperable communications network so cops and firefighters of other first responders are on the same signal, and that for everybody would get the message. The price tag for a completely dedicated network was $45 billion, and nobody had the money to build that. A purely private network was only going to get to 94% of the country, and it's that last 6% that is where a lot of the big equity issues are in terms of society. So we were stuck going into what became the National Wireless Initiative, my favorite project I worked on, so just my personal pride here. But where am I going with this? Rather than have it be a completely disconnected public option or a completely private option, we designed FirstNet to be shared infrastructure. And the way we designed that was, if you ever see a cell tower and you've got antenna for AT&T, antenna for Verizon, antenna for Sprint, right? You have all those different antenna. In Asia, there's one antenna, and there's a software box at the base that can separate the traffic. So, T-Mobile can be here, and this can be there, and this can be there. So Intel told us this cloud-based RAN technology is shared infrastructure. So if the U.S. government funded the towers and the initial use case for the FirstNet, every other commercial network could piggyback for free. So maybe the theory we're describing today, network ubiquity, is as we transition from care quality and national networks to a TEFCA network, maybe the answer is what could be like, say, a VA, everyone connects to the VA, and then all private networks can build off of that open network infrastructure. I'm going to maybe steal that analogy, but does that work closely with your thinking?
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, just look at all the infrastructure that we've built to ubiquity in healthcare. The claims clearinghouses. How did that occur? Regulatory incentives around X12 propelled that over the
mandates. How do I call that incentives? Just keep going.
SureScripts. How did SureScripts become a monopoly? Well,
meaningful use. Keep going. There's a surrounding regulatory capture.
I am, but okay. Is a ubiquitous network with regulatory capture better than no network at all? Absolutely.
Got it. Or can there be a better way? Jocelyn, if Brendan said that we're at 75% on the national networks, which payers are not allowed to, by the way, she's not invited. So what is your experience?
So I would say my opinion on this has not changed as I change seats, right? So I was out in the market helping to drive adoption of fire at scale and fully believe in the network of networks. But in order for a network of networks to work, everyone that is going to be able to use the network and follow the rules of the network needs to be in the table while you're building that network, because otherwise people are disintermediated or the business model maybe doesn't make sense because you haven't had their input in building the network. And so you have to make sure when you're building the cell tower that everybody can hang off of, that all parties are allowed to participate in that shared cell tower, especially if you're using federal funds to be able to do it, right? And today, the network is essentially closed to anyone that isn't doing treatment. It's in I'd say, a fairly narrow constraint of what treatment is considered. Because I have really good arguments for why, as a payer that has care management for ERISA funds, that I have really good care management use cases that are treatment.
So no disagreement there. And I think we're in the trial of innovative dilemma that occurs with every network building, where we get something to an atomic network and we say, wow, this is so valuable and powerful. And then people look and they say, wait, I can maybe break the rules. I could maybe do something that's not allowed by our assumptions that we created with the network. We created the network with the assumption of treatment. And so many groups doing life insurance, doing care management, doing and asked to work for law firms are saying, I could reuse this network and serve a valid use case. And the network will break apart if we don't find a way to build a paved path that incorporates the feedback of the theft operations SOP sucks. Like, we need to make it better.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, so Jocelyn's gonna raise the bar, and here's the question I'm gonna provocatively ask of you. In the network of networks, treatment, payment, and operations, Jocelyn just reminded us, those are all the HIPAA approved use cases. At the moment, there isn't a single network that does all three. So to get a network of networks to agree on all three is like a combinatorial mess.
It's like your classic law.
Kanza does all three? Okay. Kanza's in a very small network. So a question on the table for you, Brendan, is, might there be room for a totally new network, even within TEFCA, that is built on TPO and trust?
Totally. I mean, if you look at other industries, you look at banking, you don't have one set of rails for ACH. You have two, one public, one private. You for wire transfers, one public, one private. So you have plenty of examples of parallel network building. It is hard, but yeah, fit for purpose tools are better than generic tools. So there's a strong argument to be made to say, well, let's build a separate set of rails for this specific use case. I don't care. I don't care if it's TEFCA, if it's care quality. But we need to do it or we'll all fall apart.
We're going to look at David as the persona of who we're talking about. So now we're brainstorming. Does David serve as the anchor tenant to the new mall where payers and providers collaborate? He's at Vanderbilt, but he's on the ACO side. So payers and providers have already contractually agreed to share data. And now it's all done through flat files and other very traditional means. And we're grateful at Arcadia because then David says, Arcadia, can you make sense of the mess? And I appreciate being able to do the job of making sense of the mess, but I also want to help modernize the whole thing. So here's the question. You said build. I actually think it's configure. So here's the idea. Every single certified EHR has deployed with a plug or a socket in it's called the fire endpoint. And David's got them, and every doctor on the network has that endpoint.
David, can you confirm?
Yes, he can confirm. And by the way, we met recently, and I said for a fun exercise, Apple Health publishes the map because Apple connects to those endpoints. So if Apple is connected to any endpoint, then that is a fire endpoint. And so the good news is a lot of the doctors in his network, we looked them up, manually. And have we emailed you all that? Okay, you're on it? Yeah. So it's going to be a pretty good coverage ratio. Now, here's the question. You said lay the rails. That's a very capital intensive build. In the case of FirstNet, who was basically a $12 million, network. But to just plug a thin client into the wall is on the margins, basically free.
The technology is not the barrier.
I know.
Network building is capital intensive, no matter how you do it, and is time intensive. The horizon is a decade, it's not a year.
Yes.
And so, could that be a viable path? Sure. You're more like the how guy. I focus on
Yes.
the what, and the what is ubiquity. I like fire as much as the next guy, maybe not as much as you and Ryan Howells, but like I think.
Well, so this is the test that we're having. Jocelyn has to today pay for connectors to get to physician networks, and the IHE protocol to get out of the network for CCD ranges from $25,000 to $75,000 under the existing QHINs. That is a cost that is not existent if she simply plugged an app into the wall. Respond.
Dramatically underestimating the complexity of this. Deduplication, normalization, enhancement, all the things like.
No, that's not in the 25 to 30. That's on top of. That's separate. One is the plug to pull the data out, and then there's a separate fee to clean and use.
I think you underestimate how greedy vendors are.
No.
The reality is people are going to try and make money off this.
So the reason why this isn't held, because now we're getting to neighborhood watch. Okay, so let me say where we're going. Here's the reason why I say that. For those of you who are listening, the future of healthcare interoperability is to essentially use regulated, standardized plugs. That's an opinion. Happy to take your reaction. I believe that a David-led network that says, I'm going to start with the dozen or so EHRs in Vanderbilt, and we're going to get the plugs connected. And oh, by the way, if he's doing it for his ACO, that means Aetna's got the same need to get to the same practices. They may go through his ACO aggregation, or they may go separately, but there's a little bit of a group effort. So the experiment here is that either the existing networks flip their model and they do the kind of move to standards-based approach, or a new alternative comes in to get there faster. That's the test. We agreed, I enlisted Rendon yesterday in launching Neighborhood Watch. I'm going to need all of you to join Neighborhood Watch.
Raise your hand if you're going to join neighborhood.
Well, they have to know what it is.
Knowing what it is.
Right, exactly. Well, they're in without knowing. Here's why. When ONC was created, Congress gave it the responsibility of doing real-world surveillance of the certified records in the field. It was originally a sampling approach, and then basically it's been outsourced to the Drummond Group and the certification vendors. And I would say it's effectively nothing. There's not a lot of real-world implementation testing. We've been, as many of you know, we've been building a fire team. Where's BSE? Brendan? He's here somewhere. He's back there. So and if any of you want to work Brendan and nominate, we are having fun sending our team to hit fire endpoints at EHRs that are ostensibly certified. And the first 3 that we hit, actually 6, don't work. And but the good news is, as soon as the EHR vendor is aware that we're doing this in a semi-public way, there's a lot of, we'll immediately patch it, that there's some mistake, and when you ship the fix without extra fees, they fix things because they know it's a potentially $1 million information blocking fine, or it could be you lose your certification license, which is actually a bigger problem. So, Brendan, tell me about how you would envision us crowdsourcing via Neighborhood Watch. If David hits 5 of the EHRs, there's 300 of them that are certified. So, and if others, right? If Mac's in, Mac's going to be our ECW lead. He's in. So we're going to add. Tell me what you think we can do together to maximize our collective efforts. So we're not waiting for, one company to do it for everyone.
I don't attribute to malice with the attribute either. In
Yes.
this case, the EHR vendors do not know their shit does work. And so by surfacing, hey, your Vault Fire API does not ever work, they're actually kind of responsive to it. They don't fix it necessarily quick, but they start working on it. And so by adding transparency, by having a form to submit when you're encountering different blockers, when something doesn't work, then we can bring to EHRs agnostically, whitewashed if you don't want to be anonymous, and say, hey, this isn't working. And before this is public, before this is published in a way that you don't want, let's talk about how we can fix it. And I think they will be responsive. I hope they see that as a way to build better technology to integrate apps that their provider for.
And so the question is, what would be your advice to Jocelyn? And maybe Jocelyn, you might react. What would you say to her about maybe a plan wanting to be a part of this effort? Is it, you think we can kind of rally, in theory, we can have a little table of all 300 vendors. We can say, I'm going to pick this one in this market with this NPI. What do you think we can do?
I think it's natural. Like I am like the integration therapist. Like people come in and they're like, oh shit, like I ran into this with Dr. Grono or something. And so like, look, hey, like what can I do? Except say, hey, you can use information blocking and the response of, hey, you can push this way or that way. But now this gives us a mechanism to not just have me, pretend to playing, role playing as a therapist, but actually changing it at industry level. And I think, Jocelyn, send me your grievances. We'll start there.
Yeah, let's get Jocelyn to give us some feedback about how she wants to participate, if at all, in Neighborhood Watch.
So actually, I think this is really interesting, right? Because in my former seat at Da Vinci, we actually used candles every year as a forcing function to get the community to report what APIs they have on. And so it was self-recorded. All year, we would beg people to self-report. If we told them we were going to print it out or put it on a URL that people were going to hit while they were here at hands to say who's got these APIs up and running, weirdly, the APIs would be up and then it would work. So I really think, to your point...
And that was a Confluence page, basically.
And that literally is a Confluence page that gets out of date between the cycles of HIMSS every year, right? But if there's something that I think, if there are high balls on it and people know that it's being looked at, I think we all have grievances about APIs rolling out to hit not being available. Our APIs are live. They're in a production setting. We monitor them. When they go down, we know that they're down. We are expecting other organizations, whether it be a fair or provider, to have the same level of rigor around their APIs. There's probably some conversations about what availability looks like, but that's part of the conversation.
Yeah, I do think what we're going to end on this political note, do we want to have conversation for the last 5 minutes if you want? But as we wait for the new administration to comment on what the rules are going to be for interoperability, I do think there's a pretty clear and obvious mandate for a deregulatory DOJ-style review. And media, and we just had a session just now, and I think there was a lot of consensus around this, that CERT was needed at a time when we could not define the EHR. And so when we did meaningful use, we had to have it on a bounded definition. But that definition at the time was like, you need prescribing, you need, clinical decision support. But at this point, the thousands of pages of detail of what the EHR is may not be needed. There's no longer a market failure. Those products are now largely mature. So could we both deregulate CERT and double down on API performance standards? And that's the trade I look to see us do collectively. And that may be in this Neighborhood Watch a chance to look at what the natural SLAs could or should be. Is it 1,000 patients for bulk fire? Should it be, every single patient in the EHR since yesterday, ex-mortable? And so maybe with that, any questions, comments, or reactions? I'm grateful we have a lot of you around, but we'd love to get a few minutes of back and forth. And would you call yourself the instigator? No, the therapist.
Therapist, don't be a problem.
The integration therapist.
Down at the bash.
Anyone have a comment for the integration therapist? Questions, comments, reactions? Yes, please.
The question is, how are you going to really hold the teams accountable? Is it just the fear of public exposure, or is there going to be any kind of punitive action?
So this is the best question of the day because it's an unknown. So what does the regulation say right now? If the real-world surveillance step demonstrates the failure of the product, ONC can fine and decertify the product. So there's very much a stick available. If we do Neighborhood Watch over here, how do we contribute to the authorities of real-world surveillance over here? And obviously, we will offer a bridge. We need to have the ONC accept that bridge and think of this as a connected road. But for now, we have to have in good faith Neighborhood Watch in the community and an expectation of regulatory response on the other side.
I want to be clear. This will be a failure mode if we are viewed as bad guys.
Yes.
We are here to prevent and get into an information to prevent those fines.
Yes.
We're here to help EHR vendors fix these things and allow these applications to connect and work seamlessly from their providers. That should be really exciting to avoid those information blocking complaints. Because what we're seeing right now is, since information blocking, since 2016, all the complaints, 95% of the complaints have been patients just saying, I can't access my data from the provider. So just reinforcing their HIPAA right of access. All the B2B information blocking, people go, ugh, I don't want to mess with Epic. I don't want to scare them away. I don't want to ruin our relationship by doing this. And now we see with point-click care and real-time medical systems, with Intus Care and RTC,
The courts.
people are saying, you know what? Actually, I do want to do that. I do want to go into information blocking. And we're seeing not just those court cases, but information blocking complaints in a B2B sense are picking up, and EHR vendors should be afraid of that. And to know proactively about those problems, to avoid them and not hit with a fine as this next administration, you better believe it. They're going to be going to utilize information blocking and actually enforcing it less. That is 100% guarantee. You heard it here first. Brendan Keeler, Aneesh Chopra.
All right, +1. Any other comments or questions as we wrap up? Please, of course. Look at this super powerful entrepreneur, wildly successful, also working with Elements. How about this, Indra? Look at it. Look at his brother there.
Clarify one thing with us.
Yeah.
When we talk information blocking on the fireblood that we're talking about.
Yes.
So information blocking doesn't actually require that in a available profile. So any use cases,
Yes.
we'll give it to you as member. So there is no way to actually enforce this standard.
No. So,
Then we become
Kevin, here's the disconnect. Information blocking as a standalone regulation is standards agnostic.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is squares and rectangles. If ONC certifies that the G10 fire server meets the requirements, that is, I can do all population export.
Yeah.
That is, I can filter on a group. That is, I can request information since yesterday.
Yeah.
HTI 1, HTI 2.
Yeah.
If you pass certification that your software does those things, and Neighborhood Watch sees that in the real world, it doesn't do what you did to pass the test, that is a classic in the square. You lied on the exam.
Perfect. So how do we make that happen?
So this Neighborhood Watch,
And I want to be clear, the manner exception does have, standard point towards its test. So like, if you're not getting what you want, and we should have therapy session.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So listen, the takeaway today is Brendan is going to help us launch this Neighborhood Watch. David, raise your hand. You're in. Anybody else in the room that's want to be in? Brendan's going to be in. CBS, you don't have to raise your hand. You're not allowed to, but you're going to raise it anyway. You're in. Anybody else want to be in the Neighborhood Watch? Who else wants to have payers, providers, networks, partners?
Come on in, the water's fine.
Indrani, the water's fine. So we're going to bring all of you in. We're going to work together to do this in a very friendly, not mean spirit. And by the way,
Look at us, good guys.
the last session we did was with the EHR vendors, and we made it very clear. What is the most collaborative way we can introduce this construct? So this is how we approach this. I want to thank you guys for taking the time. I know we're over. You're going to stick around for a few minutes. Thank you all very much, and let's have a successful HIPS.